Hi, hello everyone, and welcome to our Denver Moves Cherry Creek second public meeting. I'm Paige Colton, the project manager. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to join, so hang tight, and we'll talk soon. Everyone, welcome to our second public meeting for Denver Moves Cherry Creek. We're giving everyone a few minutes to hop on, so hold tight.
Sadly, you have February spelled wrong.
That was a test. Thank you for passing.
Great cut. Everyone, we're just giving everyone a few minutes to hop on. We're in our second public meeting for Denver Moves Cherry Creek.
Thank you.
Everyone, we're in our second public meeting for Denver Moves Cherry Creek, giving everyone about 1 more minute to hop on and we'll get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Paige Colton, and I'm the project manager for Denver Moves Cherry Creek. This is an effort led by the Denver Department of Transportation Infrastructure. And if you haven't been here before, we'll give a quick introduction of what this project is and kind of dive into the details. Carla, it looks like the slides are a little wonky. They're kind of cut off.
It's another test. You passed.
That's now.
But
I'll try unsharing and resharing.
okay, sounds good. It's working before, so that's strange. Well, while we're waiting, I'll just walk through at a high level what our agenda looks like. So we're going to go through a project overview, as I mentioned, for those of you who maybe attended a public meeting in the past for this project, but are less familiar with it or haven't heard from us in a while. And just as a refresher, we'll be walking through our state of the system report that we've developed, which summarizes all the great information we've gotten over the past 6 months or so. We'll be giving an overview of our draft project map and list, which we'll be asking for feedback on. We'll be walking through our scenario planning process and efforts. At the end, we'll talk through a couple concurrent projects that are going on in Cherry Creek, and then we'll wrap up with next steps and questions. Carly, it's still doing that weird thing.
Okay, sorry about that. I can PDF in the meantime. I don't know if Sydney, if you've got it open.
Well, while we're paused here, yes, I'll give. Okay, while we're paused here and while Sydney gets that slide deck up, I wanted to give our 3 council members a chance to introduce themselves. So there are 3 council members who are either currently representing this area or potentially in the future representing this area. So I'll start with Councilman Hines, if you want to give a quick introduction.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Hines. I represent Denver City Council's District 10. I like to call it Denver's Perfect 10. Hopefully others do too. I currently represent Cherry Creek, Country Club, Belcaro, the northern part of Belcaro. So a lot of this project is in my current city council district. We are going through redistricting, and so as of July 2023, this area will be redistricted into districts 5 and 6, but is currently in Denver City Council District 10. Just a little bit of background. The funding for Denver Moves Cherry Creek was originally voted on by City Council in 2018, and when COVID descended upon Denver, and I'm assuming beyond, but we're here about Denver. There was a lot of discussion about repurposing these funds for other uses, and while it certainly makes sense for us to protect people's lives and livelihood, I fought hard to keep this funding here for the purpose that it was designed for. And we're very fortunate to get buy-in from the mayor's office and several different city agencies, as in mayoral appointees. And so I'm very happy that we have the funds here to move forward with the stakeholder process. And I want to thank everyone here for participating in the process. It is really important that we make sure that we can break Denver's dependence on cars, and Cherry Creek is an economic engine for the city, second behind downtown. And we could do better to make sure that we all have access to get around safely, no matter how we choose to get there. Downtown, Cherry Creek, all of the city. So I'm really excited that we're moving this forward in Cherry Creek. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilman Sawyer.
Good evening, everyone. Amanda Sawyer. I represent District 5 on Denver City Council. Cherry Creek and Country Club, as Councilmember Hines said, will be moving into District 5 in the next election cycle. And actually, speaking of the election cycle, I apologize, I won't be able to stay for the entire meeting, but Windsor Gardens is hosting their candidate forum tonight at 6:30. So unfortunately, I'll only be here for about another 20 minutes, but Owen from my office, one of my aides, will be here for the meeting, so he can sign on and wave as well. But thanks so much for being here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Thanks so much. And then I'm not sure if Councilman Cashman is on, but I know Brent, his aide, is on. So if you'd like to say any words for Councilman Cashman, Brent, go ahead.
I'll just let everybody know Councilman Cashman really wanted to be here tonight, but he's at the neighborhood planning initiative meeting for the district. And so he asked me to be here in his place and apologizes for not being here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, we are going to get this meeting started. I'm just going to share my screen. Great. Can everyone see that okay? Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Lucia.
My name is Lucia Francis. I'm a general interpreter. I'm going to be providing simultaneous Spanish interpretation. You can connect using the bottom at the bottom of the screen if you require this service tonight.
Thank you.
Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo Lucia. Soy intérprete general. Voy a estar ofreciendo interpretación en español esta noche. Si necesita este servicio, puede agregarse poniendo abajo de la pantalla. Hay un lugar donde puedes seleccionar español si es que necesitas ese servicio para esta junta esta noche. Thank you. Gracias.
Passing it over to Nora next.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Just a couple of reminders about Zoom etiquette. I think all of you have been on these meetings so often before, but please place yourself on mute when you're not talking. There's a chat window at the bottom of your screen where you can type questions in, and we'll be pausing at various stages throughout the presentation tonight to take those questions. So remember that we will get to those questions, and there's probably no need to raise your hand, but and to the extent that we can answer all of those questions tonight, we will do so. If not, they will end up in a frequently asked questions document. So we hope to be as participatory as possible. Rules of engagement, we do invite everybody's participation tonight. We do value a diversity of perspectives. We hope that everybody here is willing to listen with the intent to learn from one another, suspend judgment and be open to all perspectives, and use this opportunity to share your opinion, but also please be mindful of sharing your time with your fellow participants.
Thanks, Nora. Okay, I'm going to walk us through just a high-level project overview as a refresher. So as I mentioned previously, I'm Paige Colton, the city project manager for this project, joined by my colleague Walter, also with Dottie. And we're joined by this great consulting team. We have Carly and Sydney from Fair and Peers, and Nora and Liz from NHN Consulting. So what is Denver Moves Cherry Creek? Well, this is a year-long, a little bit more than a year-long planning effort to develop a cohesive strategy for multimodal and green infrastructure development in the Cherry Creek neighborhood and surrounding area. So our goal is to achieve the city's mobility goals and explore improvements to make it safer and more convenient to walk, bike, take transit, deliver goods, and drive in and around the area. We have three kind of main project objectives. The first is to review and reconcile existing plans and projects. So we know a lot of planning has been done in this area in the past, and there are a lot of projects that are out there and proposed, and we want to make sure we've incorporated all of those into this process. We want to perform really robust community outreach, and that's what this meeting is, why we're here at this meeting today. We want to make sure we're hearing from everybody who uses the network, passes through the network in Cherry Creek, really get to residents, to employees, to those who own businesses, really the full community of who uses the Cherry Creek Mobility Network. And then lastly, we want to develop an implementation strategy that gives us a clear and actionable path forward, not only for Dottie, for the Denver Department of Transportation Infrastructure, but for our partners to give us a guide to get to where we want to be. So our project area includes more than just the Cherry Creek neighborhood. We decided to include major arterial streets kind of around Cherry Creek in order to make sure we're addressing getting in and out of Cherry Creek across those arterials, which we've heard a lot from you all. That is a big challenge. So we have Colorado Boulevard to the east, 6th and 8th Ave to the north, Corona and Downing Street to the west, and then the Cherry Creek Trail and a little bit south of that to the south. This is a graphic that shows our project process, really high level. I'll just walk us through it really briefly. So starting mid last year, we held our first public outreach period where we asked, how do you get around Cherry Creek currently? What are your challenges? What opportunities do you see? And we incorporated that and a bunch of data that we had collected and have on hand to kind of understand how people are currently moving around into and out of Cherry Creek, and kind of what implications that has for the future of the transportation network. We are currently working on this comprehensive project list. So that takes all the projects that we've heard about or are in plans from the past, adding new projects on that we've identified. And that's all summarized in this great mapping tool that Sydney will walk us through in a bit. We're also in our second public outreach period, so we really want to hear from you all on that draft project list, and that'll be open for the next month and a half or so. So we're really excited to show that to you. We're also working on right now on a scenario planning effort. So the idea is that in the future, we can't really predict what will happen, but we're going to explore 3 different possible futures for Cherry Creek to understand that even if one of these three disparate futures happen for us, how can we still reach our mobility goals? What projects will still get us to our goals? And then our kind of third round of this process is to actually develop that implementation plan. So we're going to dive into details on certain high priority projects. We're going to be looking at what all the projects might cost, what the phasing might be. Is there an initial step that we can take early and then push the later phase for a later period of time? What are partners who will help us implement these projects? And then we're also going to be developing street cross sections for the largest streets in the area to understand what these will look like if we do make changes, and then kind of understanding how to improve different pedestrian crossing elements throughout the area. We'll also be running all of this, so this implementation plan, by the public, so mid 2023. So that'll be our third major outreach period. We want to make sure we've got everything right. Once that implementation plan, or really the bulk of Denver Moves Cherry Creek, is complete, we do have a little bit of money to do an initial implementation. That could either look like we have something we want to pilot or test out that's generated interest among you all, the community. We could also say, hey, there's a really big project here. We can advance the design with this money and get us one step closer to getting a project in the ground. Okay, I'm going to pass along to Carly.
Great. So if we'll do a screen share swap and bring up the story map. So many of you probably saw the website as a part of the invitation that you got for this meeting as well. So we've combined all of the information that Paige just shared today, along with existing conditions and then our proposed project recommendations, into one very robust website that also allows you an opportunity to interact and give your input. So this not only is our opportunity to kind of share the information, but it's a way for us to give you a tour of the website too. So you're really familiar and confident and comfortable, so you can give your feedback via the website. So we'll start, we'll skip the project process piece that Paige already went through and go into state of the system summary. So we did a really comprehensive snapshot of the existing conditions for all modes: quantitative, collected data; qualitative, how does it feel? We collected input, and all of that really set the stage and kind of gave us the groundwork that we needed to come up with this draft list of recommendations that Sydney will go over. So we'll give you an overview of the findings and kind of those highlights from the existing conditions. So we'll go through each mode, starting with people walking, people in wheelchairs, people rolling. So this is a snapshot of where are the existing sidewalks, missing crosswalks. You can see that a lot of the Cherry Creek area has a really comprehensive network of sidewalks, but there are missing crosswalks in a lot of the area as well, especially the arterials. So we've got Colorado 6th and 8th, Alameda, University. That's where we're seeing that it's really challenging for people to cross, and we're going to need enhancements to make it a comfortable experience when you're crossing those high volume, high speed roadways. So some places, great pedestrian network, definitely opportunities to make sure that's consistent throughout Cherry Creek. Next, we've got the network for people who are using scooters, people who are biking. So you can see we've got, of course, Cherry Creek Trail. That's a great asset for this neighborhood. Regional Trail connects to downtown, lots of different neighborhoods, those commuting both to and through Cherry Creek. So what are the facilities that get folks to this great regional asset? There's not many. Really excited that Garfield Neighborhood Bikeway is online now. So you can see that's that north-south orange line that was recently implemented, which hopefully many of you have ridden. I had a really great experience. 7th Avenue as well. We've got an east-west facility with a designated bike facility. But other than that, there are not a lot of existing bike facilities. There have been some that have been proposed in previous plans, Denver News Bikes especially. So we built off of that, and you'll see in our recommendations, making sure that we've got a connected and comfortable bike facility for people of all ages and abilities. Next up, we've got the transit network. So there are a number of transit routes. A lot of them run on those arterials that kind of set the bounds for the Cherry Creek area, with a 4 routes that actually kind of run through the core of the area. But when you look at those routes, you see that they tend to run less frequently. So the symbology in the map shows how frequently are the routes that are running through the Cherry Creek area. So we want to make sure to make recommendations of how can we provide not necessarily more comprehensive service, but more frequent service. We've got pretty good coverage. So we want to make sure that folks don't have to transfer, that they don't have to wait or plan really far ahead, that they can make trips that are really convenient and accessible to make by transit, just as easy as driving. So people driving, these are traffic volumes. So the numbers might not mean much, but the relativity is meaningful. So we're seeing really high volumes on the arterials. So of course, First Steel, Alameda is going to have high volumes. Colorado, this is University. This is in line with, I'm sure, how you feel when you're out there. And because of those high volumes, it can be uncomfortable for people walking or biking. So this is important knowledge and important data as we make recommendations to make sure that those are appropriate given the volumes and speeds that are on these roadways. The crashes. So unfortunately, there have over the last 5 years been 3 fatalities, and in line with the Vision Zero efforts and goals of the city, we want to make sure we're creating a safe network and having 0 fatalities and severe injuries. So this informs our recommendations. We look at these crash hotspots, and these are both priorities for where we make recommendations and also inform the kind of recommendations. So look at those big bubbles. What are the kinds of crashes that are happening there, and how can we make sure to counter them? So if we overlaid this with the previous map on volumes, we'd see probably a pretty consistent alignment that those high volume, high speed streets are where a lot of the crashes are happening. So concurrent to this effort, there's been a curbside access plan. So Scott Burton is going to present the recommendations from that concurrent effort in a little bit, but this is their snapshot of existing conditions. So they recorded the occupancy of parking in a subset of our study area. And you can see this looks as you would expect in the core area, Cherry Creek North, where there's commercial, higher density mixed use. We see a higher occupancy, upwards of 75% or more of each block is occupied, versus as we go further out from the commercial retail area, a little bit more availability for parking on each block. And then urban amenities. So this is not just specifically about transportation and the transportation network, but ingrained within that are the urban amenities, the tree canopy coverage, the benches, what makes that experience comfortable for people walking and biking. So you can see these 2 photos that really have kind of a stark contrast. So we've got the full gamut of urban amenities. and kind of experiences on this in the study area. So on one side of the spectrum, Cherry Creek North was built for the pedestrian. Many of the blocks, have great tree canopy coverage, really wide sidewalks, good materiality. On the other hand, Colorado Boulevard, wide corridor, high speeds again, and pedestrians are put right adjacent to high-speed vehicles on a really narrow sidewalk. So we want to make sure that we can make recommendations that accommodate urban amenities, and this also allows for stormwater and can move forward some of our goals for permeable surfaces as well. Great. So we had access to a really awesome data source to look at where are people coming from and where are they going to. So we looked at when people go to Cherry Creek, where are they coming from, and vice versa. We got to see lots of cool information, such as how long are those trips, what time of day are they taking them, what kind of trip is it for work, or is it for recreation, what mode do they take? And so this sheds interesting light, both how do people travel today, and then also how would we expect people to travel or want people to travel, but they're not. So kind of latent demand, we call that. So I'll show you two maps, but if you do click on the state of the system full report, there's a great appendix that has many, many more maps. You could break that data and look at it in so many different ways, but wanted to show some highlights that we thought were really interesting that helped inform our recommendations. So this one are just work trips. So people who are going to Cherry Creek for work, where are they coming from? So we see a lot of folks are coming from the southeast, kind of that dark red area. Some of that's in Denver, some of that's in other counties from other cities. So important to have that kind of interjurisdictional coordination that sheds light on that. We also saw that of all of the work trips, only 2% of them are made by walking or by biking. So 98% are by vehicle. That's a lot. We don't know if that's car or transit, just the speed of travel. It's hard to pull those two apart. Given this data source, but what we do know is we want to try to shift those to more walk and bike trips. So better infrastructure, better connectivity, and also kind of on the softer side, better bike racks and kind of the programming side too. We also saw that about 1/3 of trips that end in Cherry Creek start in neighborhoods with high inequities. These neighborhoods often don't have direct transit access. They travel in non-traditional work hours, so often not during the peak transit times, and those trips tend to be longer. 2/3 of those trips are over 5 miles, so not really a feasible trip by walk or bike, especially in the winter. So we really want to think about trips from these high inequity areas and how we can make sure that they're feasible by transit and not just by driving. The next origin destination map is for recreation trips. So specifically, we wanted to look on weekends. You can see now we had a lot of regional trips for work, but when we look at these recreation weekend trips, really focus pretty close to the Cherry Creek area. In fact, 1/3 of all trips to the Cherry Creek area start and end in the area. So that's great that residents are taking advantage of the great amenities in their area, but this is a regional destination, and we want to make sure that folks from not only around Denver, but from around the Front Range, even the state, can come to Cherry Creek and feel like they've got options as far as transportation to do that. So when we do break down those short trips, those trips that are happening kind of within the area, even those trips that are less than a mile long, you'd expect that there'd be a lot of them walking, biking. Only 11% of those are made by foot or bicycle. So really great opportunity for us to improve the infrastructure in the area to kind of switch those trips. To have more multimodal trips. So that was the data side, the quantitative piece. Now we wanted to kind of, what did we miss? What did the data not capture? There's a lot that kind of isn't present. Crashes is a great example. There's near misses that aren't captured in that crashes that almost happened but didn't happen. So we collected lots of great input. I'm sure most of you were a part of that input. So we did that through a number of different means. We had a meeting like this over the summer. We went to where the community is. We were at the Cherry Creek Farmers Market, Bike to Work Day. We had small discussions so people felt really comfortable in an intimate environment, and we had an online survey. All those combined, we had over 1,000 points of engagement. So that feedback was really helpful, and we'll show a map of where that feedback, where we heard the most feedback. So the themes of the things we heard: congestion was a problem. People, it takes a long time to travel. Kind of queuing at intersections. Finding parking was a concern. So Scott will speak to that a little bit more. And then kind of as was reflected in the data, not feeling comfortable walking and biking, frequency of transit. And then weather we can't control, but we can do our best to make people feel comfortable. So this is a great map. I highly recommend folks kind of dig into this on the website. You can scroll around and you can see the density of what kind of comments did we hear where. So we used this, kind of created a heat map of this to see hotspots of what was the biggest concentration of where people didn't feel comfortable biking. That's a great indication that we need to make sure we've got a bike facility present as well in that area. So from all of this, can be a little bit kind of depressing, I guess, for lack of a better word, but with this, there's great opportunity. So that's why we're doing this effort, as Paige mentioned. So with all of these gaps, that's an opportunity for us to recommend and prioritize projects. So we summarized kind of the preliminary ideas we had and key themes from the outreach. So we can kind of quickly scroll through these. And we'll stop on the urban amenities piece, and that's where we want to open it up for questions. But all of this is kind of setting the stage and leading up to the project recommendations that we'll dig into. But we do have, let's check on our time, a minute or two for one or two questions, if anyone has anything that they want to share or any feedback on the existing conditions piece.
Yes. How do we let you know?
Yeah, you can go off mute. That's a great question. Go off mute. Feel free to verbalize a question or put it in the chat. So all throughout the presentation, feel free to add any questions to the chat and we'll answer those.
How did you, in your planning, how did you use the area on the west side of the shopping center that currently is basically unoccupied or minimally occupied, where the there's parking and the former, what was it, Denver Dry was? How did you incorporate that in your planning?
Yeah, so this looked at the whole entire study area. You know, we dug deeper into specific areas, but we looked comprehensively at everywhere within the boundaries that Paige showed in the PowerPoint.
So you considered walking when you do that area? I'm sorry, but I don't understand when you said we do the whole thing. Looking at your map, I think you left out a good number of people who live on the west side of University and south of Alameda. We walk, there's a lot of people that walk from there to Cherry Creek. And so I would hope that even though it's not on your map of area interest, that you would consider them as to how do you access from Alameda down to Cherry Creek.
Yeah, when you say it's not present on the map, are you referring to this public input map?
Yes.
So these are all the dots that we heard through our interactive survey. So, you know, this isn't our only source of making recommendations. This is one input of many. So the data of where there are missing gaps in the infrastructure is really important as well. Crashes, all of the things we went through are kind of combined. So this is just one ingredient, an interesting one, but definitely not solely making kind of isn't the sole determinant of those recommendations.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe we're getting to the good stuff. So maybe we'll head into the draft projects, and I hope with that we'll have time at the end for questions as well. But don't hesitate to add questions into the chat as we go. I'll hand it over to Sydney.
Thanks, Carly. So I'll be orienting everyone to the different project maps. We'll talk through each of them and have some time for questions. I wanted to start first, though, with showing you kind of a important piece of this website to help you navigate it easily and find the things you're looking for. So once you scroll past that first title page, you'll see these tabs at the top, and they'll allow you to flip quickly between the different sections we've talked about, the different sections we're going to talk about. And so if you want to just kind of start at the state of the summary and see what was there, or start right in the draft projects and start giving your feedback, you can do that really easily by clicking through those. So that's an important feature I wanted to point out to everyone. And now into the project maps. So we will be going through 5 project maps according to different categories of the types of projects. We'll have a map of bicycle and pedestrian projects, multimodal projects, transit projects, urban amenity improvements, and sidewalk improvements. And so for our purpose today, there's a ton of information here. There's a lot of projects you can go through. So we won't be going through all of your feedback one by one today, but instead orienting you to this website, how to give your feedback. And also, if this website is not as approachable to you to give feedback, we'll have office hours as well, where you can sign up to talk one-on-one with a Department of Transportation Infrastructure staff. And so that's another option. We'll talk more about how to sign up for those at the end of our presentation today. But for now, let's dive into the projects. The way we came up with these different projects lists was a combination of the analysis we did that we just went through, the public feedback that we got over the summer from both the general public and multiple departments across the city of Denver. And we were also brought into these lists previous projects that have been recommended from past plans. They also include any projects where in Denver Moves Everyone. If you've seen their kind of project lists or project maps that they've presented recently. And we assessed all of this together, as I said, used that analysis, including finding gaps where all of those sources were still kind of missing places where there were gaps in the network or high crash locations that we know we would like to address some of the safety concerns of those areas. So first, we will begin with the pedestrian, bicycle and scooter projects. And this, as you can see, is the map on the right with some instructions, but I'll be going through those as well. And I will first orient everyone to this legend on the left. The purple lines here are protected bike lanes. The dark blue lines are buffered bike lanes. The light blue are bike lanes, orange neighborhood bikeway, green are shared use paths. Light green is upgraded shared use paths, so where there's already a trail and there needs to be an upgrade. And then the red are intersection and crossing improvements. And so the way that this map will work is you can use these buttons here to zoom in and out, find locations that you're interested in, and then click on a project. So I'll zoom in on this crossing, making a connection across to Cherry Creek Drive South from the Cherry Creek Trail. Once you click on a project, you will see the project information pull up, so you can see where did that project originate, and it could be multiple sources. This one came from Denver Moves Cherry Creek input from the public. Then you'll see a short description of what that project is. We'll see the kind of general project type that's shown in the legend. And then you'll see this section called number of upvotes. And this is if you like a project and you want it to be a higher priority, you'll click this heart and it'll count your vote there. And as more people vote on projects, you'll see this number of votes go up. The other function for projects, for giving comments or giving input on projects, is adding comments. So if you click this comment box, you can type in whatever your comment is here and then hit submit, and it will be shown on the screen for others to see as well. And that'll allow us to collect comments on if you have particular things you'd like to see with the implementation of that project, if you have revisions or things you think should be different about that project, or you disagree with the project. This is a great place to kind of capture all of those more general thoughts. The heart, as I said, is a good place to kind of give a thumbs up for that project and make that a priority. So a great way to approach this would be to kind of look through different projects. You can scroll around on the map or look through this list on the right. You can click this list, a project in this list as well. Sorry, my mouse is having trouble today. And we'd suggest you go through these maps and vote on your top 5 projects in each map to kind of give it some direction for kind of how to prioritize some of the big projects you'd really like to see at the top of the list. So if there's anyone that has a comment on maybe a project or an area you'd like me to add to the map, I can kind of do a demo of that. So feel free if you want to throw something in the chat, I can look there to add as a demo, or I can do one as well.
There is a comment about First and Jackson in the chat that
Okay, great.
parking is problematic there.
Okay.
North Jackson Street closest to First has had parking challenges for residents, and this should be addressed in the plan.
Okay, great. That's a bit more general. So this is a great thing I can show too. If your comment, you have a comment on a missing project or something that's not a general comment, that's actually a very specific comment, but in terms of it's not to a specific project we have, but you want to see it on there, you can come down to this survey and you can add your email if you want to kind of be kept up to date on project updates. And otherwise, there's different questions in here. If there's additional projects you feel are missing, so I can add that comment here as a demonstration. What non-location specific projects or programs do you support most? Are there non-location specific projects that are missing? And then do you have any other thoughts? So you can kind of put all sorts of thoughts here. So love that comment about First and Jackson. So I will be adding it into the survey here.
And Ken actually asks, is there a place at which I think you're answering right now where certain types of issues and problems can be aggregated and listed?
Yes.
For example, scooters, ice, snow, wayfinding. I think you're probably in exactly the right spot to answer that question.
Yes, I think if you have more extensive things that are either more general or in additional places, or you want to kind of be able to list them all in one place, jumping to this survey tab will be a great way for you to input that input. Okay, great. So I will do, if it sounds like we don't have any kind of project specific comments, which is fair because you haven't gotten a chance to play with this yet, I'll just add kind of a test one that I know we'll know to take out later. It says test, but you can write anything you'd like in this box and hit submit. And you'll see how it appears down here. So your comment will be added down here. Thank you, your comment's been submitted, and then you can move on to other projects or onto other maps. So now we've kind of given the general demo of that. I want to pause after each map to just go through general comments and questions you might have on each map. And we'll be taking notes on those things separately if they aren't, directly able to be input into this map. I see Bill raise his hand.
When you are planning for these bike lanes, Denver has a criteria for the number of bikes and then how many, what type of bike lane you're going to have. And the most restrictive, of course, are the ones that are protected. Are you using Denver's criteria for determining what recommendations you're making for what type of bike lanes?
Yes, that's a great question. And yes, we have used Denver's criteria for what facilities should go on what types of roadways.
We do have a comment from Rob saying Downing and Third intersection vehicle and pedestrian hazard due to Downing traffic issues. just as long as you're on Third Avenue.
Yeah, great. Perfect.
And Meredith, while you're doing that, Meredith asks, can you share a link to in an email so that the interactive map can be easily shared? We can drop it in the chat, but there is a shortened URL that you can use, bit.ly/DMCC story map. But we'll put that in the chat for you.
Oh, perfect. There we go. So we've got that shortened URL in the chat as well.
Yeah.
Great. And to Rob's comment, I know that Liz just brought up about Downing and Third. That intersection looks like we don't have a specific pedestrian and bicycle intersection project at that location. So we'll make sure to comb through the chat. So that one for sure we'll add it to kind of our list of possible missing projects to take a look at. And something I'll point out here too for some of the maps that have maybe terminology that's not as familiar to folks. If you kind of keep scrolling down here, you'll see some pictures of what a neighborhood bikeway looks like. This is some different treatments for neighborhood bikeway intersection crossings. So if you click on that picture, you can get a more legible version to take a look at, but just to know that that additional information is there. All right, so then after following some of the maps, you'll see these tables of non-location specific recommendations. So these are things that either encompass most of the area or we're still using more data-driven processes to pick out the exact locations that things might be needed, or they're more programmatic versus infrastructure in a particular place. So I'll encourage you to look through these as well. But some examples here are bike and micro mobility parking across the study area, improvements to loading zones, which we'll hear a little bit more about from the Cherry Creek Curbside Action Plan in the next part of this presentation. All right, so the second map, and this has fewer projects, big long corridor projects, but not as many, so it's a little bit more approachable from that standpoint. But this is our multimodal projects map. So multimodal projects are projects that couldn't really be categorized in any other way. They include improvements for people driving, walking and biking. For transit corridors, they might include some improvements to the transit operations as well. And so they're these big kind of all-inclusive projects and studies that lump a lot of modes together, and that's what you'll see on this map. So as you can see, it's a lot of the big arterial roadways or larger collector roadways that have these multimodal projects on them. We have two types in this map. So multimodal corridor plans are shown in red, and these multimodal corridor plans are kind of the higher level or more intensive type of project. So this might be an entire corridor redesign or cross-section, kind of rethinking the cross-section, but this will be a much kind of larger, higher cost construction project likely. Neighborhood traffic calming is a little bit of the lower touch type of project. So it might be more quickly implementable, a little bit lower cost solutions and more focused particularly on traffic calming than the big multimodal corridor studies might have a pretty wide range of different outcomes they're trying to achieve. So this map functions the same way. You can zoom in, click around, click a project on the map, read more about it, click a project from the list if you want, if that's easier for you to find them there, upvote them if you find them to be a priority for you, and then add a comment if you have any more particular things to say. So similar to the bicycle and pedestrian and scooter map, we have non-location specific improvements for multimodal projects as well. And as that survey that I showed before has spaces where if you see something in these tables that you want to comment on, or you think there's things missing, the survey is a great place to kind of type that information in, since there isn't a way to directly interact with this table. Great. So I'll give us a minute or two for a few questions or comments on this multimodal projects piece, if there are any.
One question that's come up, and it's been answered in the chat, but it's probably worth answering verbally, is if 6 becomes a high priority, is there a plan in place to include a protected bike lane? And Carly, I know that you answered that.
Yeah, and I think on the map prior to this, there's a facility on 7. So I'm just thinking about the volumes and speed on 6, that it probably isn't as appropriate for a bike facility, but making sure that that east-west connection is provided just kind of one block up.
And those of you who may have been involved in the East Area Plan effort that our Department of Community Planning and Development worked on a few years ago, that includes that 6th 8th Ave multimodal corridor study, which you see on this multimodal map, as well as the York Josephine corridors, the Colorado Boulevard corridor. So those are recommended in the previous plan, and we're pulling them from those plans to make sure they're incorporated into this effort.
That's a great point, Paige. And I think Ellen had a good point about connecting to transit as a pedestrian. So making sure that, even though 7th is the designated bike facility, that 6th and 8th feel really comfortable for people walking, especially prioritizing around bus stops.
All right, great. Well, we can move on down to transit projects now. So we have 3 types of transit projects symbolized on our map, and I'll zoom in a little bit so you can really see the different colors on the map. We have purple, which are some potential mobility hub locations. So this would be locations that would have transit running through them. They'll have some high frequency transit running through them once these additional transit projects, which I'll talk about in a minute, are implemented. But another point of the mobility hubs is really getting people to and from that transit. So having different options, if it's bike and scooter share as one option, or having good facilities for people to park their bikes, good information once you get off the bus. How do you get to the places you need to go? What time are the buses coming? So you can easily kind of plan your route and time your trips. So that's really the idea for Mobility Hub. They could look in different ways, but it's really about how do we make that connection from good frequent transit out into the neighborhood and back, and make that just a seamless transition to connect people on those first last mile pieces. Then the green lines are our recommended bus rapid transit corridors. And there's some good definitions and pictures down if you scroll down on the left here for these next 2 items. So bus rapid transit is a high quality, high frequency transit experience comparable to light rail, but with a bus. BRT, and so it's shortened to BRT. Corridors include dedicated bus lanes, off-board fare collection, full service stations that provide the fastest and most reliable bus service possible. And then our yellow lines on this map are for bus priority corridors. And bus priority corridors allow for faster and more reliable bus service. The design features for these corridors may include bus lanes, bus boarding bulbs, or islands. So that's where the sidewalk kind of bulbs out a bit so that the bus doesn't have to merge in and out of traffic to pick up passengers. Transit signal priority, so giving buses the priority to go first through a signal once it turns green or right before it turns green, and then transit signal queue jumps, which is what you can see in this picture here, where the bus can get ahead of queuing traffic. So it's a little bulb out that allows the bus to kind of get around queuing traffic to make the buses run more efficiently at those intersections. All right. And similarly, for our transit projects, we have some non-location specific projects. So there is a potential idea for microtransit or some type of shuttling system that could help supplement RTD coverage. And our team is still trying to think through options of what that might look like. But if you have thoughts, we'd love to hear them. Transit frequency improvements, so improving the frequency of buses on all the lines in this area. And then bus stop amenity improvements. This is an item we're going to be using a lot of great data the city has on what amenities exist at bus stops, whether the states of them right now, and using that data to help prioritize which ones needed to be upgraded. But again, if you have thoughts on bus stop needs, we'd love to hear those as well in the survey. All right, any questions on our transit projects?
Bill Allen asks, is the proposed BRT for Alameda and First part of the DRCOG long-range plan?
And so there's kind of two BRTs running through here. There's the Alameda one, which does also go on a part of First. And there's this one that Bill's referring to.
I'm sorry, say that again, Sydney.
Oh, sorry. We have two. So there's the Spearleaf-Stale BRT, and then there's the Alameda BRT that also does go on First for a short bit. Is that the one he's referring to? Sorry, my mouse.
Yeah, BRT for both Alameda and First.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the DRCOG long range plan.
Yeah, so they are both included in DRCOG's 2050 Metro Vision Regional Transportation Plan, as well as the city's own transportation plans. It's a great question.
Alan actually asked about the kinds of streets that BRT work best on, long streets without turns, like so Spear, First, Steel, Alameda, those corridors are not long and straight. And Colfax and Colorado meet those requirements far better. I don't know if there's a way to address sort of how BRT works on those kinds of corridors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think thinking of BRT as the spectrum of there isn't one prescriptive of BRT must have X. I think certain corridors lend themselves better to BRT, and BRT tends to have dedicated transit lanes, but there's definitely examples of BRT where it is in mixed traffic. So there's a toolbox of features, having as many of those features as possible makes for the most reliable and fastest transit. So there would be trade-offs, but this is a really important connection for the community. We saw that in the origin destination data. So I'm sure navigating those kind of that corridor is not straight, will have its challenges, but prioritizing this corridor for reliable and frequent transit is a priority for the region.
So Lou, her comment is that BRT through the heart of Cherry Creek, speaking of challenges on First, is that there's too much traffic and commercial use on that street. With the newly planned Cherry Creek West, it would be problematic to dedicate a lane to BRT only.
So this is very early in the process of this, and not only will this study, but in a future BRT study for this corridor dig into those details by modeling the traffic, accounting for these new developments, and running simulations to really understand the implications of kind of trade-offs and making sure that we're able to move all modes. So digging into this is the next step. So we'll definitely stay attuned to the analysis results coming.
Stuart also notes that branded bus stops in the area would be great for Cherry Creek to make the transit more visible. People feel comfortable at a stop and also indicate exactly where they are in the city.
That's a great idea, Stuart. Thank you. Great. Well, I think we've got 30 minutes left and a bit more content to cover. So Cindy, you want to just quickly scroll through a few remaining maps and then we'll go to scenario planning.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'll just kind of give the quick spiel that this urban amenities project map will function very much the same way, exactly the same way. You can click on projects, give them a heart, add comments, but wanted to, and there's some additional detail about green infrastructure down here. But I wanted to give our urban amenities expert on the team a moment to talk through I'm sorry, that's small still, the project types that you see on this map and just a quick definition of what the different types are.
Great, thanks, Sydney. Hello, everyone. I'm Meredith Minskoski, and just to give you all a quick overview of the different project types you're going to see on this map. So the green being green infrastructure, specifically green streets, helping to provide stormwater management and including elements like street trees, stormwater planters. Typically on these streets, we see wide amenity zones or landscaped medians. All these projects were identified in the green infrastructure implementation strategy that was done in 2018. The purple is green infrastructure, but specifically permeable pavers. And so those are a treatment that allows stormwater to flow through it rather than just run off of the pavement. The recommendation to incorporate this design on Cherry Creek Drive South came from the green infrastructure implementation strategy as well. So you can click on the projects here as Sydney has shown you. The water quality green streets are shown in blue. These are similar to green streets, but they've been identified really as high priority streets by the Office of Green Infrastructure, just because they're in high priority basins, meaning we need to clean the water, and incorporating green streets, water quality green streets in those locations is specifically a priority. Intersection and gateway treatments or improvements are shown in red. And this is really about enhanced crossings, paving, suggestions of gateways to create a sense of place and entry. These were included in the Cherry Creek Greenway Master Plan and the area plan in 2012. And lastly, but not least, the streetscape improvements in yellow. All the typical improvements like landscaping, lighting, and other amenities as well. Streetscape amenities came from similar past planning documents like the area plan and the Greenway Master Plan. So as you kind of look at the map, you can see that there's concentration of more recommended projects specifically in kind of the southeast area here. There's a lower tree canopy as well. And you can see concentrations of green streets, water quality in certain areas as well. So if there are any, I guess we'll pause and see if there's any, question or two, and otherwise we'll keep going.
We have a number of good comments related to our previous map. The one, this is not necessarily, the one comment from Lou regarding pork chops at First and Colorado, speaking of gateway, should be removed so that people slow down, and turning onto Colorado Boulevard. That's kind of a note as to the that particular intersection and streetscape.
Great. Thank you.
Pointed questions. Yeah.
Yes, and thanks we'll be saving a record of everything that's being put in the chat as well and making sure we document that and integrate that in. So thank you all, even if we haven't spoken your comments or questions aloud. And so our final map, which I'll breeze through because there's a ton here, but is sidewalks. So new sidewalks, upgrading deficient sidewalks. There's a lot of data here. that we don't have time to kind of get in the weeds with today, but just know it's there. And if you have particular places you want to comment on or vote on, that map is at the end. And then, as I showed before, if you keep scrolling past the maps, you've got our survey where all sorts of different comments can be captured beyond just those project maps. And with that, I think we're ready to move on to our exploratory scenario planning.
Great, thank you, Sydney. So exploratory scenario planning sounds a little bit jargony, but it's really kind of fun to think about and wrap your head around. And the comments that have been in the chat have been really alluding to this, is what is going to happen in the future that's going to change how Cherry Creek feels, how it looks, how we interact with it. So this graphic conveys what otherwise might feel like a really technical topic of, okay, we've got our Cherry Creek today, and then we have all these different driving factors, and we'll dig into those in a little bit more detail after this. But these different influencers, COVID was a really great example, something we didn't expect, that kind of averted our future and caused this other future of Cherry Creek. So this exercise is creating a resiliency lens to think about, how do we make sure that our projects are going to make sure that we're prepared for various different futures? So this exercise is looking at what are those different disparate futures and how can we make sure that our project list is preparing us for those? So the different scenarios, oh, actually, I forgot that digging into the drivers, actually, Sydney, sorry, if you want to scroll up. So these different drivers came from a lot of our feedback. It came from Denver Moves Everybody. It came from kind of just best practice, our pulse on national and local trends. So looking at density. So folks have spoken to this in the chat about new development coming in, making sure that as we see these new projects come on board and the new trips that they'll generate, that we're accounting for those and preparing for those. Travel pattern changes, how we travel, when we travel, where we travel, what mode we take, all of that is going to change the pressures, the supply demand on the area, or the demand on the area that we want to make sure our supply is matching. Technology, how we get information, making sure it's equitable, who's able to access the transportation options that are available to us. And that kind of brings us into the next one of costs. Cost of fuel is changing over time. With inflation that we've really been experiencing, we're going to see that being this lever of how we make decisions about how we travel, or even if we travel. And then equity, wanting to make sure that we're providing options equitably, not just for everyone who is in Cherry Creek, but across the entire region. And then climate change. So this is an influencer in the decisions we make, and as we kind of promote more sustainable transportation options, as well as the urban amenity features too, that will help us prepare against climate change. So based off of these different drivers of change, we've come up with these three different scenarios. So if we scroll down, the first scenario, status quo. So the trends that we're seeing today as it relates to travel behavior, as it relates to equity and various growth factors will continue as they are. So kind of on their current trajectory. And then we have two other scenarios. One is this regional hub model. So conceptually in the buildings on top, you can see that Cherry Creek continues to grow as a regional hub. So we've got downtown, Cherry Creek are really these two primary places that people are wanting to travel to. So we're seeing a lot of trips happening that are longer, folks coming from farther away and higher demand for travel. And so with this higher demand for travel, we have more of an economies of scale, and we're able to kind of support transit. We're able to support multimodal options. And then in the third scenario is distributed growth. So in this model, we're starting to see a little bit more of local hubs. Maybe Congress Park becomes a slightly bigger hub. Capitol Hill becomes a slightly bigger hub. So instead of people coming from across the region to Cherry Creek, folks tend to be traveling a little bit more locally in this model. And part of that in this narrative is that technology has increased. So technology for us to work from home, technology for us to make online on-demand deliveries from Amazon that arrive tomorrow. So we're wanting to see kind of these two different scenarios as they relate to development and the implications of travel and pressure. So our next step is to model these two different scenarios, share the results, get your feedback on reactions, and then to look and see at our project list, how can we amend projects based off of the results of this analysis? And then how can we prioritize certain projects that we feel like will create resiliency and respond well to these various different disparate futures? So we're running a little bit behind. So I encourage folks to ask questions about scenario planning in the chat, and I'll make sure to respond to those in the chat, but want to go back to the PowerPoint. We do have a few other things to share. So the first is we've two projects that are happening in Cherry Creek and citywide concurrent to this effort. So want to have Scott Burton share some of the outcomes of the curbside access plan, a few of the recommendations there around parking. So I know there's already been a number of questions and comments about parking. So invite Scott to speak to that as we get the PowerPoint back up.
Sure, yeah, thank you, Carly, and good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Burton. I'm a transportation planner with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. I manage our curbside access plan program, which is just the term we use to describe our comprehensive curbside and parking planning effort. I'm specifically with Dottie with our curbside and parking group. So as Carly mentioned, we're working on a curbside access plan for the Cherry Creek neighborhood. We kicked this effort off in August, and we will likely be implementing this early next year, likely January, and I have more information to share on that shortly. So the draft recommendations that I'll share here in a second were developed in partnership with our stakeholder working group. So the stakeholder working group is essential to ensuring that we are creating recommendations that will be well received and effective and what have you. In terms of our study area, it basically looks at Cherry Creek North RNO and the Cherry Creek East RNO, and then certainly includes the Cherry Creek bid as well. So what are curbside access plans? So they're basically neighborhood or area-based comprehensive curbside and parking plans that result in the implementation of parking signs and the modification of restrictions, typically implemented within 12 months, although given some transportation operations staffing challenges, that's currently looking more like 16 months, but 12 months is what we strive for. They are designed to address an area's changing conditions and the needs of various users. So thinking about resident users, their guests, employees, people picking up and dropping off, loading, just making sure that we're addressing all the different users at the curb within the neighborhood. And then we want to make sure that we're responding to current levels of activities, densities, and curbside demands. We know that the curb is under increasing demand with transit lanes, bike lanes, and then traditional parking and loading and all of those activities as well. So I want to make sure that the plan addresses these things. And then one of the things that we really emphasize is that we really want to make sure that we're maximizing our curbside resources, that we're using them efficiently, that we're creating a predictable parking environment, and that we're looking for opportunities to integrate multimodal transportation priorities. And as I hinted earlier, it is very customized and collaborative. We work very closely with our stakeholder working group, and there's not a one size fits all. All plans are different. And this, I think once this is implemented, this will be our 20th plan. So a very customized approach to every neighborhood we work in. And then thinking more about the plan highlights. So we are in the process of refining our specific recommendations with our stakeholder working group, but from a high level, these are some of the plan highlights that I'd like to share today. I should mention that these recommendations are based on documented parking occupancy and are consistent with the goals that were established by the stakeholder working group early on in this curbside access plan process. Additionally, these recommendations are based on identified parking challenges and opportunities. So hitting on a couple of the highlights here, one being that we'd be looking to modify the parking hours of operation to increase parking space availability later into the evening. So this would apply to the paid parking areas as well as the traditional time limited areas in the neighborhood. So today those restrictions are 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and we'd be proposing that they be extended to 9 p.m. And then we'd be looking to convert some of the permit only parking to 2 or 3 hour parking. And based on conversations that I've had with stakeholders recently, I'm pretty confident that our plan is likely going to propose that that be 2 hour and not 3 hour, but more to come from us on that. But really, that's just designed to provide parking options for a variety of users, maximize our supply. And then wanted to also mention that parking permits would still be valid in these time limited areas. In addition to this change, we'd also be looking to introduce an area permit. So today, if you have a parking permit to park in the neighborhood, you can only park on your block. In the future, those permits would be converted to area permits so that people could park on any block within a defined area. We'd also be looking to introduce some no parking zones strategically in the district to provide passing opportunities. If we are going to propose that some of the permit only block faces become time limited, then we need to ensure that there are room for people to pass on street. So just looking at opportunities to create some passing zones on the streets, specifically between 3rd and 6th Avenue. And then we'd be looking to implement performance-based pricing as well. And I know that was quick. In the essence of time, I will put my email address. Well, let me touch on next steps real quick, and this will just take a second. So we'll be finalizing our recommendations with our stakeholder working group in February, and then confirming our outreach approach in March. Most of the outreach will take place April through June. We will then incorporate feedback, finalize our recommendations in August, prepare for implementation, and then implement in January 2024. We could probably do that in November, but we know that Cherry Creek's a busy time around the holidays. We don't want to do anything to interfere with that. If anybody's interested in learning more about this effort, I will put my email address in the chat, so feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you, Scott. And I'll hand it off to Meredith to talk about the shared streets effort that's happening now as well.
Yeah, just wanted to share with you all a little bit about another project that's happening, the shared streets. So you're probably familiar with them, but they're designed to equally prioritize people, bikes, and cars, and really, get cars to slow down so they're more people-oriented spaces. Our work, we're doing kind of a program development project looking citywide at shared streets and the opportunities there. We've studied kind of commercial locations and community-based locations for the shared streets, and you can imagine more towards commercial land uses and residential. If you want to go to the next slide, we have a survey or this website open right now, I guess, for some more feedback. So related, but obviously a different website here. You can see the link. We are working on identifying priority locations for shared streets across the city. And so the map you see here, the blue are community shared streets, yellow are commercial, and those are just streets that are kind of the possibilities, right? We did a deep analysis on what they could be, the possibilities, and now we're starting to prioritize. So please spend some time, get in there quickly, and provide some feedback. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Scott, and thanks, Meredith. We are almost wrapped up here. I'm just going to go through next steps, and then we'll open it up for questions or other comments. So the next steps for the Denver Moves Cherry Creek project are get your input on all of these draft projects that we've talked about tonight. We'll be coming to some RNO meetings, holding some focus group meetings. So we'll be in and amongst you all over the next month or so. We would love you to pass along the story map to everyone you know, and make sure we kind of get as much feedback as possible. We'll be finalizing this project list based on what we hear. We'll also be picking out those top priority projects that come out of the process that we have, and we'll be defining additional details for those projects. As Carly walked us through that scenario planning, kind of different possible futures, we'll be modeling those. We'll be prioritizing the projects. So we have a big long list. We want to make sure we kind of have our top list that we want to move forward with as soon as possible. And then we'll have our next phase of community engagement after this month and a half this summer. So our big ask of you all is to definitely go to that story map that we put in the chat. If someone can throw it in again, just to remind everyone, go to that, go to the draft projects section if you don't want to read all the other information that we have in there. and then scroll through the maps and upvote or comment on projects. If you just think this map is kind of too overwhelming and confusing, you are welcome to just talk to us directly. We have a couple hours a week set aside to talk with people. So feel free to sign up at bit.ly/DMCC office hours. We'll sit down, we can chat. If even signing up for office hours seems like too much work, you're welcome to just email us your comments and we'll incorporate those in. We're at Denver Moves Cherry Creek at denvergov.org. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. I would ask all of you to go to our story map if you haven't already, if you're on a computer, and start clicking around in there. We are going to stick around, happy to answer questions, have a discussion, but we'd love for you all to go in and at least like one project in that story map in the next 10 minutes before we let you go. So I'm going to open it up for questions.
Paige and Carly, this question has been asked a number of different ways by a number of different people in the chat. The question being, how does this planning effort work with or conflict with the private projects that are occurring in the neighborhood, of which there are many and some of them are quite large?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. This plan gives us an overlay of what we want to see in Cherry Creek for mobility over the next 30 years. This is your opportunity to say, wow, we really need XYZ, we need this bike lane, we need this transit lane. And then once we finalize this plan and are able to incorporate these things into this implementation plan, we can ask developers to help us provide these things that you've asked for. So this is a really great opportunity for you to get your projects in, get your ideas in, prioritize projects, and then we can work with the development community to actually get these installed faster than just our department would be able to with our limited resources. So please provide input here, because this will have an effect on all development moving forward in the area.
And I think maybe another way to answer that question, in case folks were wanting to get a little bit more in the details of the trips that those projects would generate. So we've considered all of the planned development, and I mentioned that we're running that model for those 3 different scenarios. So in that status quo scenario, kind of the existing conditions, we are modeling the traffic that will be generated by the developments that are in the works now. So Cherry Creek West included within that. And then when we look at the dense concentrated development scenario, we've actually multiplied that by an additional 50%. So 150% of the volume. So really looking at kind of in a densifying scenario, what are the implications to traffic? So we are considering the growth that these new developments are bringing as we consider recommendations.
Yeah, great addition, Carly.
Paige, Kevin has a practical question regarding construction and its impact on the passability of sidewalks. Sidewalk closures are lasting years and it impedes pedestrian access, clear passable access. Is there a way to comment on that, address that? Where should that comment go?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the city also recognized a few years ago that as we have more construction in the city, we're going to have impacts to not only how people are driving, but also how people are walking and biking around those construction projects. So earlier this year, we put into place a new policy that guides how development needs to incorporate pedestrian and bicycle access around developments, and not just consider kind of how many drive lanes they're closing. So this is something that you'll start to see implemented as projects start going and new projects start being developed. This includes requirements of having, covered sidewalk. What are they called? Like a covered sidewalk place where people can walk alongside the construction, for example. It's a great question and definitely something that's on our radar.
Cindy indicates that she thinks that the East Washington Park area should receive outreach regarding this project. And we will make a note of that and make sure that our outreach includes that part of town. Because as you know, Cindy, walking and biking and driving between those two neighborhoods is frequent and enjoyed by many.
Yeah, and Cindy, if you have any connections to the RNO in the area or other groups that might be interested in a presentation about this, we are happy to come and present about this project. We'd love to socialize the story map as much as possible.
Mike asks about funding. How will these projects be funded? And sufficient funding or the lack thereof could significantly slow down implementation. It's probably a question for you, Paige.
Yeah, that's a great question. Projects are funded in a lot of different ways here at the city. We have our own budget that we get funding for on an annual basis. We also apply for grant funding from the state, from DRCOG, a lot of different, from the federal government, lots of different funding sources there. We also rely a lot on our partners, RTD, for example, the BID, the Mall Transportation Solutions, the TMA in the area, lots of different partners that we want to coordinate with to deliver these projects. So it's kind of a complicated answer. We have a lot of different funding sources. Where funding comes from in a particular project is kind of to be determined, but this plan gets us as close as possible to identifying possible funding sources, and then for those really high priority projects, helping us flesh out and be more competitive for funding in the future.
Doug, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I want to ask a question about what sort of consideration is given to like building standards or let's say design review standards in particular neighborhoods. For example, in our neighborhood, there's a lot of concern about the aesthetics of certain road changes or bike lanes put through the neighborhood. If we're a designated historic neighborhood, is there any kind of consideration of how like orange bollards or plastic bollards conflict or don't fit in with the aesthetics of a particular residential neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. And something we hear a lot is, we don't like these flex posts, they're pretty ugly. We definitely hear that. Our number one priority is safety here at Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. So our goal is to get improvements out as quickly and as efficiently as possible. We are talking about how to make upgrades to the flex posts and paint that you see on the street. But right now we want to improve safety as quickly as possible. And that's why projects are going to be going in that are flex posts and paint for the foreseeable future until we can work on upgrades.
Did that answer your question, Doug?
Yeah, I do think it, makes neighborhood support more difficult if the aesthetics are not taken into account. So, people who really do want bike lanes or safety, I think there is a balance there that does cause conflict within the neighborhoods.
Yeah, definitely hear that. Thanks for that comment, Doug. Sorry, Douglas.
We may have time for one last question before our time together is up, but there have been several questions about sidewalks on Colorado Boulevard. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of encumbrances in the right of way at that location, fences, private property that people have put in there. How are sidewalk gaps addressed and filled when those conditions exist on a major arterial like that?
Yeah, and when we say encumbrances, we're talking about
I think fences, bushes, plantings, walls, brick walls that are part of, that people have built in order to around their property.
I
But,
see.
but it's clearly in the right of way where a sidewalk would go.
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky question to answer. There are a number of different ways we can address that. You know, if it is within city right of way and we have a really clear need to put in a sidewalk, we'll work with the property owner to move what they have, to modify what they have, that sort of thing. For sidewalks improvements in general, we have kind of this conflict between what's in city right of way, where the curb currently exists, you know, where people's property lines are. There's a lot of different variables that we have to take into account, but our goal really is to provide a safe and comfortable pedestrian experience. And it kind of looks different for every street and every property that we encounter. So sidewalks are definitely, you know, really challenging, but exciting kind of almost frontier for the city. We've been filling in sidewalk gaps over the past couple of years. And now that Ordinance 307 passes, we have an opportunity to fill in even more and complete the sidewalk network. But it's going to be kind of a complicated process.
We just followed up with a question regarding Colorado Boulevard being a state highway and how right-of-way and setbacks operate in that category of corridor.
Yes, it's even a more complicated answer. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I do know it kind of depends which state highway it is, and who has maintenance responsibility, the city or the state. But we're working closely with our state partners on the state-owned highways to make sure that we also think multimodal on those corridors.
Well, I think we're at time. Carly and Paige, do you want to close this out?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. We will have this meeting video online if anyone cares to look at it again or pass it along. Again, we'd really love to get your feedback on the story map, which we've put in the chat a couple times. Again, sign up for office hours if you would rather talk in person, or email us at denvermoves.cherrycreek@denvergov.org. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good night.